Over the weekend, we laid out the three different points where a Justin Jefferson deal could be done with the Minnesota Vikings. Mandatory minicamp, which starts tomorrow, training camp next month, start of the regular season. And I suggested it could happen sooner than later. And I suggested, as some of you noticed, it could happen as soon as today. Now, it made me very nervous that it might not happen today by putting that out there, that I wouldn't be surprised if it happened today. And you know by now how this goes. There are certain things we report, and then there are certain things we say in a way that if you are so inclined to read between the lines or the tea leaves, as Sims would say, you know what we're saying. I'm not going to say any more than that for now, other than to say, as of yesterday, we were trying to get the word out that today was the day. And minutes after the conclusion of PFT Live, during which Sims and I talked in detail about the strong possibility of a deal being done, how we got here, where it goes from there, we didn't know it was going to happen so soon, but I had a feeling it was happening today, and it has happened. The team has announced it. Multiple reports have put the numbers out there, and new money average, the graphic that we use all the time, there's two versions. The one that's got BS and fluff in the numbers, then there's the other one with the real numbers that has A.J. Brown previously at number one, $32 million a year in new money. Jalen Waddle, number two at $28.25 million per year in new money. Amon-Ra St. Brown, number three at $28 million per year in new money. And Tyreek Hill at four, $25 million per year in new money. He's now number five because Justin Jefferson comes in first overall and the highest paid non-quarterback in league history at $35 million per year in new money. It's a 4-year extension, not 3. I thought it might be 3. So the Vikings get a little more here than maybe what Jefferson wanted to agree to. It's a 5-year commitment, 4-year extension. And remember, he was due to make $19.743 million anyway this year. So, and one thing I've learned over the years, because the agents get upset when you say only the total value at signing. But the truth is, that's all that really matters, the total value at signing, because there is no such thing as an extension. They rip up the old deal, they replace it with a new one. And the new deal that Justin Jefferson will sign, or maybe has already signed, is 5 years, and it would be I'm going to get this number right, $159.743 million. So $159.743 divided by 5 is $31.94 million per year. That's the value from signing. Pretty damn good. Almost as much as the highest new money average before him of 32. So he gets $31.94 million per year on a 5-year deal, $35 million per year in new money, $88.743 million fully guaranteed. It's signing with $110 million total guarantee. That tells me that the first year is fully guaranteed, the second year is fully guaranteed, a lot of the third year is fully guaranteed now, and I would guess by March of next year, the rest of year 3 becomes fully guaranteed. $110 million over the first 3 years would be my guess, and then the remainder over the final 2 years. And if he's still playing at a high level, they'll whip it up and they'll give him a new contract when they get to that point. But it is 5-year commitment. Vikings and Justin Jefferson will be together. And it wasn't easy to get here. Last year, just before the start of the regular season, the ball was on the tee. Jefferson was ready to go. The Vikings weren't willing to get to where they needed to be. And then the season comes and goes. No deal is done. We get into the offseason, no deal is done. And this is something I said earlier on PFT Live. And if you don't want to believe me, I really don't care. I'm going to keep saying what I know and what I believe. And what I know is, before the draft, the Vikings were not trying to get Jefferson signed. And I think that implies they were just waiting to see what would happen. There were multiple teams that would have given up at least 2 first-round picks to get Justin Jefferson if Minnesota was willing to do it. They never showed a willingness to do it. The weird little wrinkle in all of this, multiple different people hearing that the Vikings were trying to move up to number 5 in the draft with the Chargers to get receiver Malik Neighbors before he could be picked by the Giants at 6. Now, I never heard what that would have meant for Jefferson. I think common sense suggests if they would have gotten Neighbors, and they already have Jordan Addison, a first-rounder last year, probably would have traded Justin Jefferson, or at least tried to. It very well could be. Someone suggested this yesterday, not anyone with a team, just an active reader and viewer, and it makes sense. If the Vikings had gotten up to get Neighbors, then the market opens for Justin Jefferson, and you try to get a pick in that window where you can then draft your quarterback. So they still could have gotten J.J. McCarthy as part of a package that would have sent Justin Jefferson somewhere else if they immediately pivot. Think of what that would have done on draft night. Talk about a turd in the punch bowl. And look, Vikings fans wouldn't have been happy, but they're getting Malik Neighbors, who would have cost them about $30 million for 4 years. 4 years for $30 million. That's why teams are at least exploring, when they've got a great receiver who's due to be paid, do we make the investment, or do we do what the Chiefs did 2 years ago with Tyreek Hill? Let's get what we can, let somebody else pay him, and let's move on. That's still out there, and they're never going to admit to it. That ship has sailed. It's over. You're not going to undermine your current reality. The reality is it didn't work out, so they renew the vows with Jefferson. They make him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, and they move forward like many fans wanted them to do. I know my son was threatening not just to get off the Vikings bandwagon, but stop following football at all if Justin Jefferson had been traded. So whether or not that means the Vikings are going to contend for a Super Bowl, who knows? But one thing I know, more often than not, when you throw the ball in Justin Jefferson's direction, he catches it. Look no farther than the 4th and long play in Buffalo a couple of years ago. Just get the ball there. You need a quarterback who's willing to pull the trigger and trust him, like on 4th and 8 in the playoffs against the Giants, when Jefferson supposedly was double covered. But if you watch the film, the safety was flat-footed. Jefferson would have run right by him into the end zone for a touchdown to win the game in advance. But I digress. It's a new day in Minnesota. JJ and JJ. McCarthy, the 10th overall pick in the draft. Jefferson under contract for 4 years beyond 2024. We'll see what it means. Now, and by the way, we'll get the full details. We'll have the full breakdown at PFT. I don't have them yet. I expect to get them at some point today. But it sounds like there isn't a phony, fake back end. If anything, it sounds like it gets a little bit light on the back end. And the Vikings may have to deal with this again after 2026. If he's still playing at a very high level, they may have to reconfigure the contract. Cap keeps going up. Market keeps going up. So we know how this goes. After 2 or 3 years, you may be right back at the table. Look at Tyreek Hill. Right back at the table with the Dolphins after 2 years under contract in Miami. We reported last week, and this is 100% accurate, not to be confused with my other stuff that isn't, but this was accurate. Tyreek Hill's been trying to get a contract from the Dolphins since the 2023 season ended. The A.J. Brown deal got his attention because, like Hill, Brown was traded in 2022, and Brown had 3 years left on his contract, and Hill's got 3 years left on his. Technically, he's got 2 because that third year is a phony, fake, fugazi $45 million aimed at bumping the average from 25 to 30, which it does. So he's ready. And now that Jefferson is paid, his job will be, I believe, to try to get as much or more than Justin Jefferson. What I'll do is a full breakdown of the next Hill contract, what it would look like to catch Jefferson. The problem is when you got the phony $45 million on the back end of the current deal, it makes it harder to get to a new money average that would match or exceed Justin Jefferson, and they would probably have to use some phony baloney, fake back-end number on a Tyreek Hill extension to get him to 35.1. That's what he's going to try to do, get to 35.1 and remind everyone he's still the best. As Mirror, Mirror on the Wall is telling him he's getting older now, and there are better receivers potentially coming up behind him with Jefferson at the top of the list. So Tyreek Hill will be the next. And then what that means for Tua, we'll see. But you're going to have Jalen Waddle at 28.25. You're going to have Tyreek Hill at somewhere between 33 and 35, maybe 35.1. What does that leave for the quarterback, and what will the Dolphins do about their quarterback who's got 1 year left on his rookie deal at $23.1 million? Then comes Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase has been waiting for Jefferson. Jamar Chase has 2 years left on his contract. Remember, he's a year behind Jefferson, but they were teammates at LSU. And Chase is at about $31 million over the next 2 years. As I've said before, it makes it easier when you have an average of 16, 15, thereabouts in your current deal, in the old money. It makes it easier to get new money pumped up because, again, we look at the whole contract. And if you're starting low for the first 2 years, it's easier to get higher on the back end in a deal that's going to pay out 27, 28, 29 million a year from signing. That's the thing that I think Chase needs to look at. And that's the thing we always try to look at. What's the deal worth from the moment it's signed? For Jefferson, it's $31.94 million per year on a 5-year deal. Chase may want $31.95. Who knows? But that would put him at probably 38 or 39 million in new money. So I doubt that's going to happen. His best play is going to be to try to get to 35.1, just like Tyreek Hill, and it'll be easier for him to get there. We did the math last week, I think premised on 35 or 36. So the numbers are already out there if you go to PFT and search Jamar Chase's name. I think I've already done what it would take to get him to 35, and that may be what he tries to do. And what I said last week, the Bengals need to move quickly. I mean, the Tyreek Hill thing is probably going to take some effort. The Bengals need to just put it together right now and say, Jamar, here it is. Here's your 35-1. New money. You're going to beat Justin Jefferson. You're going to one-up him the next day after he does his deal. You're going to rain on his parade and end up with more new money than him. Because again, folks, the Vikings found this out the hard way. The Cowboys are finding it out with CeeDee Lamb, who's now going to want something in Justin Jefferson ballpark. The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. It never, ever is going to get cheaper unless some weird thing happens that renders the player unable to play for you. You don't want to bet on that. You don't want to bet on a guy getting hit by a bus. You don't want to bet on a guy suddenly not being able to play because he's lost his talent. You want to bet on your guy continuing to do the thing that he's done that makes you want to keep him. And you don't want to drag your feet. Get it done. The Vikings effed around and found out because they could have done this cheaper last year. They did it now before it kept getting more and more and more expensive. All things considered, based upon what I've heard so far, it's probably the best deal the Vikings could have done under the circumstances. And they did it. And now, what comes next? And it's something that will always continue. And you may have some pass rushers out there now that are trying to target the Justin Jefferson number. You may have guys at other positions, guys who are receivers or non-receivers wanting more for themselves because the rising tide keeps lifting all the boats. And as of right now, the high watermark for non-quarterbacks is set by Justin Jefferson. It might not last for long, but it at least lasts for now. Oh, I was going to wrap it up, but I invited questions. Let me just do a quick scroll here. I didn't give people a whole lot of time, but let's see if there's something that I haven't already covered that is worth mentioning before we wrap this up. Most of them address the other pending deals. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb. Again, Cowboys, don't screw around. Try to get a deal done based upon this contract. Not that Lamb should get more than Jefferson, but Jefferson at least sets the bar. And again, if the Cowboys hadn't screwed around, they might have been able to do it before Jefferson pushed the bar to $35 million. I know the Cowboys have said, well, Lamb wants to wait. You know how you keep him from waiting? You put an offer on the table and say, this is it right now. You got 48 hours to take it. You got 48 hours to take it. Now, I know that's an aggressive move, but they could have forced the issue if they wanted to pay CeeDee Lamb. They decided to wait because they like to wait. But again, waiting never makes it cheaper. T-Fish, do you think the Vikings purposely waited until after PFT Live ended to announce the deal? I'm kind of glad they didn't announce it like 10 minutes before. We would have been able to talk about it briefly. But look, I'm glad it came out after 9 a.m. Eastern on a Monday. I tell teams all the time, and I say it somewhat jokingly, but mostly seriously, don't make news on the weekends when people aren't checking PFT while they're working, because that's when they're going to check it while they're working. When they're off with their families enjoying their lives, they're less likely to see what's going on. You're more likely to do it when you're procrastinating, finishing the reports that the boss wants by 3:30 p.m. So, yeah, do your major business during normal working hours when most people are in position to flock to PFT to see what's going on. Now, there are going to be people who are going to want to throw crap at us for suggesting in the past that he could have been, should have been, might have been traded. Think back to what I was saying before the draft when receivers were getting paid, Jefferson wasn't. I said it's a very simple proposition. Pay the guy or trade him. You're either going to pay him what he wants or trade him to a team that will. It was a very binary, very simple proposition. I didn't want him to be traded. I wanted the Vikings to snap out of this fever dream that made them think time was on their side. Time was never on their side. I think they wanted to see, because there was no urgency to sign him pre-draft. They wanted to see what would happen. They wanted to see what else might be out there. They wanted to see if someone would make them an offer they couldn't refuse. I don't know that, but I think common sense suggests it. If, as we accept as true, and I'm telling you it is true, that there wasn't negotiation pre-draft and it all happened post-draft, it tells us as a matter of common sense the Vikings were waiting to see what was out there. You throw in this Neighbors thing, they looked to see what their alternatives were. We can pay Neighbors $29 million over 4 years, $30 million over 4 years, whatever it may be. He's getting $29 from the Giants. It would have been a little bit more from the Vikings. Or we can pay Justin Jefferson $35 million a year. These are all the things you look at. And then when there is no option that becomes the clear and obvious thing to do before the draft comes and goes, you focus on getting Jefferson done, which they did, and they got it done. So that's the bottom line, and I'll leave it at there for now because I've addressed most of the questions that you have raised. Thank you for taking the time to do so. Thank you for taking the time to check out ProFootballTalk.com and our videos, which are available embedded in PFT clips or on the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. We'll be back on Tuesday morning with a new edition of PFT Live, unless something else happens today. I mean, if the Bengals are smart, they'll have Chase's deal done by dinner time. So maybe I'll be back talking about Jamar Chase getting 35-1. That would be something. That would be a way to one-up Justin Jefferson. If Chase and the Bengals get a deal done today. If it happens, I'll be back. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow morning. Have a great day. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.